No, just the stone models of Dr. Bundy. The models of the feet.
Right.
He said that, Shirley, he said they put in Tallahassee. And it should have been shipped down here. I wonder if they're still upstairs. I wonder if they're still upstairs.
Court will come to order.
I will call on for hearing a motion for Dr. Buckhouse's testimony.
Your Honor, before I begin, I believe Mr. Bundy wanted to address the court.
Yes, sir. I have some statements that I'm thinking necessary at this time for me to make for the record concerning my right to counsel or lack thereof in this case, and concerning other deprivations of my Sixth Amendment rights to concerning representation by counsel. I make these observations for the record that none of the attorneys representing me presently are representing me by choice. Counsel of my choice has been denied me by prior court rulings. That beyond the general allegation that I don't have right to counsel, I think it should also be noted at this time that I have not chosen any of the members of the team, members of the group of attorneys now representing me. And as I noted to the court earlier, that Mike Minerva, who is the head of the Public Defender's Office of the Second Judicial Circuit, withdrew from the case without any discussion with me or without seeking my or requesting any input from me. And that Mr. Minerva had, as the court witnessed yesterday, as the most experienced courtroom presence, as well as the most experience in this case. And his withdrawal without any notice has caused a great deal of confusion to take place in this case. I would also state that I did not have any choice in the selection of Bob Hagan to represent me here in Miami. And that in total, I have not been at any time my opinion about who should be representing me within the Public Defender's Office has not been solicited or followed if it was given. I think it's also important to note at this time that there are certain problems with communication between myself and my attorneys which have reduced my defense to a defense which is not my defense nor sanctioned by me, nor one which I can say I agree with. It's more than a disagreement. I think that experience these past few weeks has shown me that there has been a pattern of behavior on the part of my attorneys in attempting to basically to avoid me, avoid my input in the case, and present me with accomplished decisions that I have been denied an ability to make significant input into the case. I have been denied an ability to make decisions as to who would do opening statement, who would do closing argument. And that while my right to make decisions in this case has been effectively denied me by counsel and not counsel of my choice, I must also say that the burden of the success and the failure of this particular defense is all mine. That I feel closed out from my attorneys and precluded from any significant participation either in the preparation or the presentation of the defense. That attempts by me to participate in the courtroom have met with vigorous opposition on the part of my counsel. And as a result, as I said, I believe that I have been closed out of all meaningful participation in my defense. And this is important to note, again, for whatever purposes, I don't know. If it's only to let the court know that what we see going on here today is something that I have no responsibility for, but something obviously that I will bear the complete consequences. And I hope that if Your Honor in the future has a situation where a defendant wishes to have counsel if the state opposes, that you will weigh the consequences of refusing choice of counsel very heavily, because there can be no substitute in my mind for a defendant having an attorney who he feels is his, who he feels that he has a close working relationship with, and who he has a great deal of confidence in.
The court has considered that already, Mr. Bundy. And I don't know of any case I have ever seen or experienced where an individual who is an indigent has received the quality and the quantity of counsel, and that they have painstakingly gone through conferences directly with you on every time they've tendered witnesses on questions. There have been 5 separate counsel here representing you. It's unheard of. I've never seen it done before. Who's minding the store for the public defender in Tallahassee, I can't tell you. And what's happening to all those other defendants and indigents that they represent, I can't tell you. But that is a matter of administrative discretion within the public defender's office. And I'm sure that the circuit judges would be sounding pretty loud if they weren't able to spare all 5 of them to be here in Miami. Of course, that's not before me. But this court has watched with a great deal of carefulness the fact that before witnesses are tendered, you are questioned, and this record would show hundreds of "just a moment, please," and where they go by and confer with you. I realize very clearly, and the court has ruled before, on what I think is the sincerity of your statements. I have no doubt that you feel that it's important, as you say, for the record. But this court has just seen absolutely no foundation to that fear. I have been barraged, and I use the term loosely, with more legal memorandums in this case. And possibly that's the luxury of having 5 counsel. One can be here and 4 are off finding cases. I've never seen it in the history of any case I've ever tried, or in 27 years at the bar, have I ever seen anything exactly what has happened in the defense of this case. And not only that, you have participated in the defense of this case. You've participated actively. The court has allowed you to participate. And if it's your motion now that you want to do the defense under Ferretta and we retain them as standby counsel, we'll do so. Because I think that probably is the only right as far as that's concerned you have. And if that's your inquiry and if that is your position and that's what you want to do, I want to know. This dancing around and putting innuendos in the record is not satisfactory as far as I'm concerned. Is that what you want to do now?
I don't think it's a matter of innuendo, Your Honor. I think it's...
Well, never mind, that's not my question.
Right. What I want to do now is not really the issue because we're too far down the road to do anything.
The question is that you have a Sixth Amendment right under Ferretta against California that you and I have talked about before to represent yourself. And if you want to do so, the court's not going to deprive you of that. And that's my question. I will not discharge the public defenders. They will remain as standby counsel for you for conference. We have an old saying in the law, and this is something that we've joked about before, and it's so true and appropriate now, that if you had been completed your third year and been admitted, we'll tell you that a lawyer that represents himself has got a fool for a client. And it's so true. And I want to caution you about that, but I'm not going to deny you that right, and I want you to understand that.
Your Honor, I've always taken that particular axiom like something like a person who works on his car as a fool for a mechanic. It all depends on how much you want to do it yourself. And some things are best done by yourself than others. But I think I already have a co-equal, at least in the eyes of the Florida Constitution, have asserted my right to a co-equal position with my counsel, and that they are counsel of record, and that I have also earlier in Tallahassee informed the court that I wish to exercise that.
And the court has given you that right. You questioned witnesses, you participated in motions. Now, as I said, there must be 100 conferences with you by counsel, and this record will reflect from its beginning. Just a minute, please. And they're going over and confirming. I haven't seen a witness tendered or cross-examination ceased that they haven't confronted and consulted with you, Mr. Bundy. And if you had anything else, and you've displayed no bashfulness to this court, if you would have had some serious or founded reservation, you would have let me know about it. And that's why I don't think there is a great deal of substance other than a recitation for the record at this time. But I will say to you that very definitely, and I want you to clearly understand that if at this time you want to conduct your own defense, you've got every right to do so. So says the United States Supreme Court, and we've been through that before. And I want to give you that right if you want it.
Well, at this stage, Your Honor, perhaps even as long ago as last May, when I last brought this matter to your attention in Tallahassee, the acceptance of my Sixth Amendment right as interpreted by the United States Supreme Court in Ferretta really would be it's an empty right at this point. You're giving me the gun, so to speak, without the ammunition. I have trouble enough getting files to my counsel. How in the world am I going to get them if they're no one's counsel record? Certainly, I could get up here and examine every single witness for the defense. There's no question in my mind that I could do it. That is, what's the question in my mind is whether I could do it well or not.
Big question in my mind too, Mr. Bundy, but that's not the subject matter of Ferretta.
No, sir. But the subject matter of Ferretta goes beyond the mere exercise of a constitutional right. And I think the founders as well as the Supreme Court justices envisioned that right also gained its substance through the due process clause. And that to stand up, as I said before, and simply go through the motions is not the way the system was set up. And that's simply all I'd be doing without background That is, without the depositions, for example, or the other documents we've collected in the case. I'm not making innuendos, and I'm not standing here simply to clutter up the record, except to reinforce that part of the record, which to me clearly shows that I do not have counsel of my choice.
We know you don't have, and we have ruled on that. Florida Supreme Court has ruled on that. The Northern District of Florida has ruled on that. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled on that, and the United States Supreme Court has ruled on that. I don't know where else you can go. I just don't know where else you can go. I just don't know where else you can go. Somewhere along the line, you ought to understand that your choice didn't meet the criteria for admission to practice law in the state of Florida. And he's an excellent lawyer. No problem with that. But that doesn't mean anything. It means that what he should have done is come down to Florida and take a bar exam. But he didn't choose to do that. And that's history. We're not going to rehash that. The court heard a lot of testimony and made a ruling on it. And Mr. Bundy, we want to say to you that we're at this threshold, that this court is freely and unequivocally ready to join issue with you on competency of counsel. And I am ruling specifically so that it will be decided on the first appeal, and not 5 years from now or 10 years from now, if one is appropriate. That this court is finding clearly, unequivocally, you've had the most excellent counsel I've ever seen any defense attorney in any defendant in the state of Florida ever had. And I clearly inject that in the record, sir, and I invite you to file an assignment of error should there be an appeal, because it should be reviewed in your behalf. And I'm not going to hear any more nonsensical information about competency or incompetency of counsel. Now, you feel free to discuss anything with your counsel. They're here with you. We have joined issue on it, and we're going to proceed with this trial.
I wasn't addressing the issue of competency of counsel necessarily, but on the other hand...
So your question is one of just plain submission of counsel.
Imposition.
No, it's submission, and this court has addressed that. If they don't do every little single solitary thing that you want them to, they're incompetent.
No, sir.
And bless your heart, if they do, I'm going to fire them. Okay? And the court's ruled on it now. Let's proceed on. You ready on the other motion?
I filed a memorandum of law in support of defense being allowed to call Dr. Buckout to testify in front of the jury. Our motion includes case law concerning the subject, as well as a list of Dr. Buckout's qualifications. I think the court is aware of many of them from the testimony he's already given on the motion.
Yeah, I want to hear you about this evidence code.
Yes, sir. Well...
densities.
Okay, you say it is offset. Could you explain that?
This, I can explain it to the best of my ability, not being an electronics technician. But electronically, these two images, as they are produced on the TV screen, are just set very, very slightly, a good term may be out of phase, so that one image is projected and the other one is simultaneously, and yet not quite in the same sequence.
In order to bring out a greater contrast in the photograph.
And to make it, yes, so that you can actually see what's in the photograph.
What about A4? A4 or A5?
We can talk about both of those simultaneously, I think. They're both identical pictures. These come off of the three-dimensional monitor, which I said was a pseudo three-dimensional monitor, and that really we're not producing a 3D image of a photograph. What we're producing is more like a topographical representation of the different densities that are seen on the photograph, hereby giving the appearance to the viewer that everything's just standing up. It's sort of like looking at a topographical map that shows the mountains and the valleys.
Okay. Can you explain to us how that occurs?
Yes, as the original negative is viewed, by the equipment and scanned, it will take the areas of varying densities, whether the areas are real dark or real light or in between, and assign a value to them so that the lighter areas appear lower and the darker areas appear higher. In other words, you sort of have hills and valleys, depending upon the density of the photographic film or the photograph that you're looking at.
Okay. When these particular exhibits here were made, were you present in the laboratory?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And was the equipment operating properly at that time?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, sir.
How do you know that?
Well, all the indicator lights were on. The scanning device was working properly. I observed the setting of the camera as far as the light intensity was to make sure that was all right.
Okay. Now, have you ever used this kind of a technique in a court of law before?
Yes, sir, I have.
And where was that?
In the state of New Mexico, in the 2nd Judicial District.
Okay. Was it accepted by the court?
Yes, sir, it was.
And have you used it in any other cases?
Yes, sir, I have.
Have you used it in any other bite mark cases?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many other cases?
I believe it's 4.
Okay. And in the other cases and other things that you have done with this particular system, has it provided you with the results that you expected?
In most of them, yes. In one of them, definitely not. It didn't help one bit.
Okay. Could you explain that to us?
Yes, I can. If the photograph or the negative you're examining does not show any detail or does not have enough density variances in it, the machine won't pick them up. If it's not there, it just won't do it. I can't add anything to it or take anything away.
That was my next question. What exactly will the machine reproduce?
Only what's on the film. That's all.
If it's not on the film, it doesn't get on the TV?
No, sir.
How much discretion is involved in the operation by the person that's operating the machine?
Could you explain that just a
Okay,
little bit?
What kinds of variations and things can be done by the operator to vary whatever results may come out of it?
You actually don't vary the results as much as you vary. The only thing the operator can do, he can vary the intensity or the amount of light that's received by the camera. He can vary that. Other than that, that's about it.
Okay. You said that you had viewed a photograph, or maybe more than one, of the bite mark in this case.
Yes, sir.
Also. Can you tell us if there is anything on the photographs that you have in front of you, the exhibits there, that does not appear on the photograph of the bite mark?
To the best of my knowledge, what appears on these photographs is the same as what I saw on the prints of the bite mark.
Okay. It merely allows you to see it better, is that correct?
That's all. The idea is to be able to enhance the photograph, look at what we've enhanced, and then go back to the original photograph and try to confirm what we've seen. Is it really there? Did we miss it the first time just because we were looking at so much we couldn't tell what we were looking at?
Okay. Your Honor, we would offer in the evidence in A1 through A5.
You wish to vote aye?
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
A1 and A2. A1 is just a negative.
A1 is the television camera looked at the negative on the table, and this is what it saw in the negative, you know, as a negative.
Okay, so that's just like a picture of the negative.
Just like a picture of the negative itself.
And A2 is what?
A2 is
A3, I'm sorry, A3.
A3 is a positive projection of the negative itself, similar to a photographic print.
And if I understood you right, A2 is a composite of both of them?
No, wait. Yes, A2 is what is called the enhanced mode.
And that's a composite of both A1 and A3?
Yes, it is. It's A1 and A3 projected simultaneously and slightly offset.
What mode is that called?
It's called the enhanced mode.
And what exactly how do you define enhanced?
I would define enhanced as a method of seeing better what is there, or bringing what is better on the picture into more clear focus for me.
All right, now you said what's done with them is they're projected simultaneously, slightly offset. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct? You know how far offset they are?
The specifications, I believe, call its offset somewhere between 0 and 500 nanoseconds.
Okay. Now, did you personally choose that figure to all?
No, that's in the specifications
Can
of
you
it.
change that?
Yeah, I cannot change it.
You know why that figure was picked?
I do not know.
Now, that gives the effect of looking, when you're looking at the picture in A2, it gives the effect of looking like there's mountains and valleys and dimples, right?
To the person that sees it the first time, yes, it does look like that.
That's not really what it's showing, is it?
That it really isn't what you're looking at. It's just when you look at it the first time, that's what it looks like.
Anyone who's not used to looking at that picture and knowing what they're looking for is going to think there's a third dimension in that picture, isn't it?
No, not in that one.
No, wait a minute. Doesn't that give the impression of showing parts of it are raised and parts of it are lower?
Not to me, no, sir.
I guess I'll leave that to the court to decide whether it looks like it's raised or lowered. But what that is really is you're putting two images and offsetting them slightly, right?
That's correct, sir.
And what you're creating is an optical illusion, isn't it?
No, sir. It's not an optical illusion as
What are you
such.
creating then?
As far as I'm concerned, all you're creating is nothing more than an enhancement of the photograph, and it lets you see the various densities on the photograph a little bit better.
Now, does that offset any of the parts of the film that have more emulsion on it? Is that what it is?
To answer your question as far as film emulsion, I don't know. All it is, it's just image offset.
So you don't know what it enhances really, it just enhances whatever.
It enhances whatever is on the photograph.
Now, what is A4 and A5? What mode is that?
On the equipment itself, it's called a three-dimensional mode. It's a pseudo three-dimensional mode.
All right, it's called a three-dimensional mode, right? Is that correct?
The title on the controller is three-dimensional.
Does it give the appearance of a three-dimensional?
Yes, sir, it does.
Is it in fact a representation of a three-dimensional depiction of the bite mark?
No, sir, it is not.
What is it really?
It is a topographical map, if you will, of the densities that are present on the film.
And that creates an optical illusion to look as if you've got a three-dimensional picture, doesn't it?
It creates an illusion that it is three-dimensional.
But that's not what it depicts, does it?
No, it's the topographic map of
What
the
is a
densities.
topographic map?
A topographic map, in this particular case, as the photograph is scanned and produced, it's assigned a series of values depending upon whether the photograph itself is light or dark. The light areas being the more dense areas are negative. For the more dense areas, they are given a value higher, so that as the topographic line comes across, you actually have a raising of that line for a given value. As the film again becomes darker on a negative, which is the lighter area on a print, then that is assigned less, so the lines go down. So you get a hill and valley effect, or a high and low effect.
Who assigns the values to the different densities?
This is done by the factory.
All right, and you don't know what values were assigned or why they were assigned?
No, sir, I have no idea why they're put in just exactly the way they are.
Do you have the capability of raising certain areas or lowering certain areas?
You can, in this particular machine and in this particular mode, you can look at it in either a positive or a negative manner, which allows you either to raise, in other words, show the topography in a raised form, or to show the topography in its inverse form.
All right, do you have the capability of varying the amount that is raised?
Oh, yes. You can increase the intensity, or you can turn the gain up on the machine, which will make it look higher or lower.
How did you make those pictures?
We set this particular one right here. I set the machine halfway, just right on the neutral spot, and took the pictures.
What does that mean in terms of how high it's going to raise certain areas and how high it's going to lower certain areas?
This is just an average figure that just shows you, that just assigns, instead of increasing the gain to elevate them more so that you can see them, this just gives you a normal readout on the way the machine is programmed.
Now, A4 and A5 give the impression that you're seeing depth in the bite, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
But in fact, it's not showing depth in the bite.
No, sir, it is not showing any depth at all.
Now, this system is called a digicall. Is that the name of the system?
That's one name for it, yes, sir.
All right, well, what type of system is it?
This is essentially a closed circuit television system.
All right, and when the picture is taken by the TV camera, what happens to the image?
Electronically, what goes on in the machine, I do not know. As far as
Is the image broken down and assigned different numbers?
here again, I don't know.
Do you know what criteria you use in assigning different numbers to the density levels?
No, sir. It's done by the manufacturer.
Doesn't the machine really produce images inside the machine, disassemble it and assign number values to it, and then reassemble it on the video screen?
It may do it, I'm not sure.
You don't know what happens?
No, sir.
When you say you're enhancing the bite mark, how do you know that what you're seeing is part of the bite mark?
That comes from experience only.
But what is
The photograph I see represents a bite mark.
what it's enhancing is anything that's on the negative,
That's correct, sir.
or bringing out, or whatever.
That's correct, sir.
And the density that it's bringing out is not the density of any bruise pattern on the skin. It's bringing out the density of whatever's on the film. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And what you've got here are pictures of the television screen. Isn't
That's
that
correct.
Now, what you do is you put the Do you know whether the original negative or not was put on the light table?
I was told it was the original negative.
Okay. And then the TV camera takes a picture of that.
That's
It
correct.
goes into the machine. We don't know what happens on the machine, but at some point, there's a video screen which produces another image. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
And then a picture of that image is taken. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then either from the negative of that, a print is made? Is that what happened?
That's what happened in this case, yes, sir.
Now, what training experience have you had in photography? Anything?
Minimal, sir.
Okay. What training experience have you had in the operation of this machine?
Only on the job training.
All right, and who trained you?
Mr. Bill Ebert.
Okay, and who's that?
He is the man that's responsible for this machine. He works for the Park Service.
And what is this machine usually made to do?
This machine has been used by the National Park Service in viewing and enhancing aerial photographs for archaeological means. It has also been used by the Atomic Energy Commission and Sandia Laboratories for nonspecific testing of materials by engineers. This is primarily in the atomic field. When they build devices, they can x-ray the devices to see if there's any flaws in the machine. It has also been used to do density analysis of bone by some investigators. It is also used by pathologists. Dr. Weston, McFeely, and all have written a paper on it, on a morphometric pathology study studying the interior linings of blood vessels, and this was used as a preliminary device.
Let me interrupt this a minute. Let's take the jury in. Just a minute, Doctor.
All right, sir.
Didn't mean to interrupt you in the middle of a sentence, but we've got 15 impatient people.
All right, sir. International Imaging System. Oh no, that's Sandia Corporation. Okay.
Sure. Read the doctor's last statement back and then put him back on where he's testifying and excuses the doctor's
Written paper
upset.
on the morphometric pathology study studying interior linings of blood vessels, and this was used as a preliminary device.
To help scan areas that they were looking for to see if they were present. Also, similar techniques have been used by the House Select Committee very recently in the investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy.
What this oftentimes is used for is to look at aerial photographs, isn't that correct?
Look at, oftentimes, aerial photographs, photomicrographs, x-rays.
And when this machine is producing a three-dimensional mode, are you familiar with the ComSat system?
No, sir, I am not.
All right. Does this machine that you've got scan the the silver crystals in the photograph actually scan the levels of them? You know?
I don't know. It does have a scanning capability, but exactly what it scans other than the densities, I don't know.
The actual effect of A2, A4, and A5 is to distort the picture, isn't it?
A4 and A5 is not a distortion. It's only a topographical map of the area. Number one, that's all you see. A2 appears to people that have not looked at this before to be a distortion.
Okay. A4 and A5, what you're doing is taking a two-dimensional picture and making it look like it's three-dimensional.
No,
Is
sir.
that correct?
A4 and A5, what we're doing is taking a picture and making a topographical map based on the density.
What is a topographical map if it isn't bringing out a third dimension?
No, it's not necessarily 3 dimensions at all. All it's doing is putting the densities in a 3-dimensional mode, if you want to do
Isn't that mode
that.
called the third-dimensional mode?
It is a pseudo 3-dimensional mode.
Isn't it called on the machine a third-dimensional mode? Objection.
I'll let him answer.
On the monitor itself, it is called a 3-dimensional mode.
And it really does not depict the third dimension, isn't it?
No, sir, it does not.
Okay, so it's a distortion of the picture, isn't it?
I wouldn't call it a distortion. All it's showing me is where the areas of the most density is and where the areas of the least densities are.
And on A2, do you see the curvature of the ruler? How it looks like it's curved there? Does it distort the ruler also?
As you look at the photograph that we've taken from the screen being slightly around, yes, it does appear that it's curved slightly.
So that would distort the photo, or the image of the bite mark too, wouldn't it?
It would distort if it is curved, and if don't have the picture right in the center of the tube, it would tend to bend it slightly.
And since the ruler is distorted, we could infer that the picture of the bite mark is distorted also. Is that correct?
You may assume that. I won't assume it until I could check it against the original.
Do you know what scale these photographs are on?
They are approximately 1-to-1.
What do you mean by approximately?
The person that printed the pictures, we asked him to print them 1-to-1. The areas on the ruler, if he did the best job he could. So I asked him.
But you didn't do the job, so you don't know whether one.
I did not do the job.
You didn't do the photographic development of those prints?
No, sir.
Does Mr. Ebert know how this machine works?
Yes, sir, he does.
All you do is essentially follow the instructions and push the buttons, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
You don't know what happens to the image when it gets in the machine?
No, sir.
The A3 is just a positive print of the negative of in A1, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's what it represents.
And it is the same thing as a photograph, is that correct?
As a printed.
Printed photograph.
Yes, sir.
And you stated earlier that it does not have anything on that picture that isn't on the print, isn't that correct?
No, I say it represents a print.
Right, but didn't you say that there's nothing on that photograph that wasn't on the negative or wasn't on the print?
No, I said that I believe I said that it was an accurate representation of the print. Whether there might be a piece of lint or something on it at the time here, whether the negative has been scratched since the original photograph was made. I don't know unless I would compare the two side by side.
Those would be the only things that would be depicted on that photograph that wouldn't be depicted on a print, isn't that
I would
correct?
think so.
Now, do you have the capability when you're bringing out this video screen representation of the negative to enhance the contrast, to up or down the contrast?
Yes, just like on your TV set, I can change the contrast on the TV set. I can do it on that one.
Just fiddle with a knob and up and down the
Just a
contrast.
typical contrast control. You can either brighten up the screen or darken up the screen.
And you don't know how or what values are placed on what densities?
No,
do you?
sir.
And you don't know why, which values were placed for each density?
No, sir.
May I move on?
Yes, sir.
No, I have no further questions. We object to the introduction of the pictures. Let me get my A's here, right? A2,
Excuse me, John, could we call another witness before we get to the argument portion? Might simplify things for the court.
Doctor, you want to step out of this?
Call Dr. Cleveland, please.
Come back this way, Doctor, please. Doctor, come right over here, step up in the witness box and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You be seated, sir.
State your name for the record.
Lowell J. Levine.
And Dr. Levine, are you a forensic odontologist?
Yes, sir.
And in that regard, were you consulted in the matter of the state of Florida versus Theodore Robert Bundy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, Dr. Levine, you were supplied, were you not, with a photograph of the bite mark that was involved in this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And subsequent thereto, did you have occasion to visit the remote sensing laboratory in Albuquerque, New Mexico in this regard?
Yes, sir.
And what was the purpose of your visit to the remote sensing laboratory?
To see if one particular area on the photographs of the bite mark could be photographically enhanced to see if more detail could be brought out that would allow comparisons to be made.
Okay. Let me show you these exhibits here, A1, A3, A2, A4, and A5, and ask you if you recognize those.
Yes, sir.
And what are those, sir?
Those are prints of the work that was done by Dr. Campbell at that laboratory.
Okay. At the time that you were at the laboratory, did you also view and see on the television monitors these various areas that are depicted in those photographs?
Well, areas similar to these. I believe that these were done recently, but I saw a photo or saw on the video screens things that were similar to these at the time.
Okay. And at that time and now, once you have the photographs that are have been provided to us by Dr. Campbell, do they assist you in rendering opinions in this case?
Well, in one particular area, yes, sir.
Could you explain that to us?
Yes, sir. In the area which I think we kept calling on the depositions, Ring 3, in looking at the photograph which was originally sent to me, there were areas where I felt very strongly that something was there, but what was there was not enough, looking at it with my eyes, to be able to do adequate comparisons. And so I had worked prior to this with the Select Committee on Assassinations, where the pathologists, and I worked with them, used photo enhancement techniques on the X-ray films taken of President Kennedy at autopsy to assist them in their determinations of the course of entrance wounds and fracture sites and things like that. And so that I felt that it might have some merit to try and enhance the particular area that we call Ring 3, so to speak, to see if anything more could in fact be brought out in there.
Okay. And using the photographs that you have there that were made by Dr. Campbell, can you make additional comparisons and examinations in this case?
Yes, sir.
And could you explain that to us, please?
Yes, sir. Using the enhancement photograph, it has brought up some of the areas which I suspected might be there, and has in fact shown them to actually be there. When you then go back to the photograph, you can be, more certain that what you're looking at is truly there and not artifact. And so I know that what I'm looking at on the photograph at this time is in fact there.
Okay. So, in other words, Doctor, now that you have seen these photographs and visited the remote sensing laboratory, can you now identify on the original bite mark photograph these various areas that you were just talking about?
Well, yes, sir. I, once again, was specifically interested in one area.
Okay. So that we all understand these photographs and your visit to the remote sensing laboratory, was that merely to aid you in your investigation in this case?
Well, yes, sir.
I have nothing further for you.
You certainly may.
Which, if any, of these pictures do you intend to use?
In court today,
Right.
I don't have to use any of them.
You're not going to show any of those pictures to the jury?
Well, I would like to show this one to the jury.
How about these other pictures over here?
Well, I think it would be a good idea, this is the negative, to also show the negative to jurors, and then the enhanced photograph. The other material I don't particularly need, but one of the effects that you have when you see enhancements, and then you know specifically what you're looking for on the photograph, you can see it much more readily. So that I can see the areas that I did use to compare on the photograph that I believe went into evidence. So that basically the two that, if I had my choice, that I think should be shown would be the photograph and then this enhanced photograph to show, or the photograph of the negative, which is A1, and then the photograph of the enhancement where it's brought out those areas, which is A3.
Let me ask you this in terms of,
I see that now.
what you're looking at is A3 now. Are you aware that, let me ask you, what do you mean by enhancement?
It has brought out the areas so that they're much more visible to the eye.
Well, what do you call A2? This picture.
What do I call A2?
Right.
Picture?
Well, you were aware that Dr. Campbell identified as that being the enhancement.
Well, I'm sure they're all enhancements. You know, I don't know the technical terminology for it. Once again, I'm using I'm using a product. And the one that I was interested in was, I believe, A3.
Which is positive print of the negative. All you're interested in is the positive print of the negative and the negative. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Well, basically, that's what I used. I didn't particularly find 2, 4, and 5 particularly valuable for working with the uppers in my analyses. And they reconfirmed my comparisons on the lowers. But once again, my main interest in doing these enhancements was to see what could be shown on the upper, arch, on the upper front teeth that I couldn't see in the photograph, which I felt was there just looking at it with the naked eye.
A3 or A2, A4, and A5 then, do you know how those prints are produced?
Well, as I said, I'm not a computer technologist, and with the space age technology, I'm a user rather than an innovator.
So you don't know what they represent then?
Well, I do know what they represent. They represent an enhancement of markings of the color scale that was done. In other words, my understanding is that this particular technology is much more sensitive than the human eye in discerning various shades. And so it aids us, so to speak, or it aids the human in examining what may be there.
Do you know any more than Dr. Campbell about how the machine works and how these different, what values are given to the different densities?
Do I know more than him?
Right.
No, I think I know less than him, if anything.
Thank you. Can you show me an A2? No, I'm sorry, A3. What exactly is brought out that isn't on the original print? If we could get the one-to-ones, if we can get the print of the one-to-one.
You had 2 of them. You want the negative or you want color?
Black and white would be fine.
Can I look at
What's the color?
Can I look at both?
Sure. If you then show us what exactly is brought out that isn't on the original picture.